deep in the heart of Bavaria. In the northern shadow of the Alps, an enchanted castle stands atop a precipitous cliff. A stunning testament to a troubled king who turned to nature for solace and preferred the company of wildlife to that of his subjects. A king who lost himself in the construction of a castle so ambitious and audacious, it cost him his fortune, his power, and ultimately, his life. This is Neuschwanstein, the Mad King's castle. Neuschwanstein is a Bavarian icon. At first glance, it is the quintessential storybook castle. So picturesque, it was the inspiration for Disney's Cinderella Castle. It's a fitting tribute, since Neuschwanstein earned its creator, King Ludwig II of Bavaria, the nickname the Fairy Tale King. The surrounding countryside is equally magical. Neuschwanstein looks out on glistening lakes that host spectacular waterfowl, including the vaunted mute swan, a favorite of the Fairy Tale King and an emblematic symbol in these parts. The well-watered lowlands provide plenty of food and protection for other charismatic creatures as well. Nestled beneath the northern edge of the Alps, they're surrounded by forests that provide sanctuary for dozens of animal and bird species. Above, the high meadows and steep mountainsides are perfect habitats for the deer, goats, and antelope that have called this part of Europe home for thousands of years. King Ludwig knew the area well. As a young prince, he'd spent much time here with his family. He reveled in the natural beauty of the surrounds. Even as a boy, he preferred the tranquility of the countryside to the bustle of the Bavarian capital, Munich. But in 1864, Ludwig became king at the tender age of 18, when his father, King Maximilian, died suddenly. The young Ludwig was ill-prepared to rule. He preferred art, music, and architecture to politics and power. One of his first acts as king was to summon classical composer Richard Wagner to his court. Wagner's operas appealed to Ludwig's fantasy-filled imagination. And it was that same love of fantasy and beauty that compelled him to build Neuschwanstein in this spot. He picked its location carefully. He wanted to literally look down on the castle of his youth from his own fairy tale world, while still drawing comfort from its nostalgic familiarity. This was to be his sanctuary from the surrounding world, a home for all occasions and all seasons. In the spring, another local royal surveys its kingdom as well. the golden eagle. With wingspans that can reach more than 7 feet, wickedly curved beaks, and razor-sharp talons, these massive raptors have called the Alps home since long before Ludwig. Soaring up to 15,000 feet, they can glide for hours, using warm updrafts from the mountains to stay aloft. Males and females form monogamous pairs that mate for life, and they take long, undulating flights to advertise the extent of their empire to other eagles. At the center of their territory is their castle, a massive nest they use year after year. Called an eyrie, it weighs hundreds of pounds, and just like Neuschwanstein, is built into a steep cliff face. The chick inside is about 2 months old, almost ready to take flight and make empty nesters of its parents. It's an only child now, though it likely had at least one sibling when it hatched. Golden eagles normally lay multiple eggs, but more often than not, the biggest and strongest chick either outcompetes or outright kills the smaller ones. The fratricide ensures the survivor will get its parents' undivided attention. Once the chick fledges and matures, it'll fly hundreds of miles to find its own isolated territory and begin construction of its own mountain fortress. That's what King Ludwig set out to do in the summer of 1868. He wanted a secluded but spectacular retreat far from the politics and intrigue of Munich, and he poured his heart into the design. Ludwig's dream was a magnificent knight's castle that embodied his idealized view of the Middle Ages, rising like a jewel from the natural wonders that surrounded it. Built, he said, on the lofty heights, breathing the air of heaven. The work started with a bang. Crews used dynamite, which had only recently been invented, to level the top of the ridge. They laid the foundation stone on September 5, 1869, marking the official beginning of the epic construction project. Hundreds of laborers and artisans then set to work. They built concrete foundations and laid hundreds of thousands of bricks. And as the walls began to rise, huge trees were felled for scaffolding. With efficiency even nature's resident woodworkers would have appreciated. These European beavers take skilled labor to the extreme. They cut down trees with their sharp teeth and use whole trunks and branches to build intricate family lodges with underwater entrances and impenetrable topside defenses. The leaves of the branches are left on. They serve as emergency stockpiles for later in the year, when food is less plentiful. Beavers are keystone species, wielding an oversized influence on their surroundings. They build dams, which filter water, flood rivers, and create crucial wetlands. And they cut back trees and bushes, opening up forest canopies and promoting the growth of heavy underbrush, which provides a safe haven for many other animals. Today in Germany, there are as many as 25,000 beavers. But back in King Ludwig's day, they had been hunted almost to extinction in Europe for their pelts and their castoreum, a vanilla-scented secretion used in medicine and perfume. Ludwig was not a fan of the hunting and banned it within hearing range of the castle. He preferred to watch the animals, not kill them. When he wasn't keeping an eye on construction, Ludwig spent hours out on the trail. He was much happier in the wilderness than he was with other people. An acquaintance once said that Ludwig is repulsed by his family and the entire court, hates the army and soldiers, finds the nobility ridiculous, and despises the masses. That didn't leave too many people to like. He loved taking long walks in the evenings, when the red deer were most active. The deer make their home in the alpine meadows, grazing on the sweet grasses and digesting the fibrous cellulose in their 4 stomachs. They typically congregate in same-sex groups, but in the fall, the males and females come together to breed. The males, called stags, have been preparing for the fall mating season for months. They've fattened up and grown sharp antlers. As their testosterone levels rise in anticipation of the rut, their antlers harden and lose their velvety protective covering. With the females looking on, the stags posture and pose, trying to intimidate their rivals. Their distinctive roar is also used to establish dominance, and the mature males raise quite a racket. One stag decides a mud bath is the way to go and attacks his puddle with gusto. He's cooling himself off and getting some protection from insects. As the ladies look on, another male sprays urine to mark his territory. Eventually, the posturing ends, and the dominant males get down to business. The loser backs off. The victor wastes no time reaping the benefits. A harem of up to 20 females, known as hinds. Over the next several weeks, he'll mate with them and hoard them, keeping them away from the less dominant males. By winter, the 2 sexes will have gone their own way, living apart until next year's rut. For some, winter in these parts is a quiet time. Alpine marmots head deep underground, hibernating together in groups of up to 10 to stay warm. They pad their burrows with hay, seal the entrances with stones and soil, and slow their heart rate and breathing to use less energy. Other inhabitants stay much more active, undeterred by the cold. Though the water in these streams hovers just above freezing, the white-throated dipper sees nothing wrong with a swim. An enthusiastic avian member of the Polar Bear Club, he wades into the water in search of insect larvae and freshwater shrimp. King Ludwig was enchanted by all manner of wildlife, seeking it out no matter the season. In the mountains above the castle, the alpine chamois remain active all winter long. Like the red deer, females and the young usually live apart from the mature males. But in winter, they come together for the rut. This can be a dangerous time for young males, as the more mature ones attempt to chase them out of the female herds. On the jagged rocks, these chases can be fatal, even for the famously agile chamois. For the workers at the castle, the winters were equally dangerous. Year after year, they toiled in all seasons, facing tough conditions on the mountain ridge. The work was brutal, especially in the snow, and accidents were common. In all, at least 30 people died during construction. But by 1873, the gatehouse building was complete. Ludwig, desperate to get out of Munich, moved in, even though the main palace was barely underway. Although he was still the king of Bavaria, much of his power had been stripped during a series of wars that unified Germany. Bavaria was now just a kingdom within the larger German Empire, and Ludwig became even less interested than before in the affairs of state. At Neuschwanstein, he still reigned supreme and could focus his energies on the fantastical world he was creating. The castle was to be both a place to bring his medieval dreams to life and a tribute to the music of Wagner, whom Ludwig revered. Like a theme park before theme parks existed, its interior design was based on the stage directions for Lohengrin, Wagner's opera about the swan knight of medieval German legend, who was sent to rescue a maiden in a boat pulled by swans. The name Neuschwanstein means New Swan Castle, and the regal bird was an ever-present motif. It was also one of Ludwig's favorite companions in the wild. Swans appealed to his romantic side. They're beautiful, poetic, and mate for life. These two mute swans seem to be engaged in an amorous dance. But they're not actually a pair, and they're not dancing. They're male neighbors, engaged in a carefully choreographed display, spinning in close proximity with raised wings and arched necks. The goal? To communicate and seemingly agree to a territorial border. Once détente is reached, the swans can return to their actual partners for more important business. Spring is mating season. Then, it's back to work on the massive nest, which needs to be dry and ready by the time the female lays her eggs. Around her, the forest is coming to life as the spring sun thaws plants and animals alike. Up in the cliffs, the golden eagles have a new brood of eggs waiting to hatch. In the pine trees below, a spotted nutcracker is hard at work. It's trying to get to the tiny, well-protected nuts inside a pine cone. On the ground, a colony of black-backed meadow ants is out in full force. An unlucky earthworm is good protein. It's quickly overrun. The ants are also gathering materials for nest construction. The workers build mounds up to 3 feet around, usually on top of rotting tree stumps, in places where mottled sunlight filters down through the canopy. Inside, one or multiple queens lay hundreds of thousands of eggs, the next generation of ants for the colony. King Ludwig could have used that kind of manpower as he continued to oversee the construction of his castle. Problem was, he kept altering the plans and adding new elements to the design. He wanted the most advanced technologies of his day, including hot air heating systems, running water, electricity, and even internal phone lines. Ludwig's expectations were spinning out of control, and so was the budget. The construction costs were piling up, and the king began taking out personal loans to keep his decadent project on track. He was far more concerned with the castle than with the running of Bavaria. His crews worked year-round, trying to keep pace with his demands. The marmots, on the other hand, are not quite as driven. They've been asleep for more than 6 months and are finally getting back to work. They have much to attend to. Their burrows need to be mended and enlarged, and they need to fatten themselves up on fresh shoots and insects, so they'll be able to survive the next winter. They go about their business with a nervous energy, at once playfully excited and twitchy with worry. They're always on the lookout for predators. A sentry sounds the alarm. The marmots and everything else in earshot scatter in all directions. The threat comes from on high. The golden eagle is on the hunt. Below her is chaos. Everyone running for cover. Even the chamois are nervous. The eagle can't pick them up, but it can hit them with enough force to knock them off the steep cliffs to their deaths. The marmots make a mad dash for the safety of their burrows. This time, the eagle comes up short. But there's no doubt she'll be back. Her eggs have hatched, and she has a belligerent chick to appease. In the trees below her, an avian father finds himself equally harried. He's a great spotted woodpecker, identifiable by his long, sharp beak, striking black and white feathers, and bright red head patch. He and his mate, equally striking but without the red head, have built a sturdy home inside this hollow tree. They do their best to keep it tidy, sharing the load like any good couple should. But there's a red-headed monster inside, and it demands to be fed. And fed. And fed. Beetles, butterfly larvae, seeds. The youngster isn't picky. For 4 weeks, he'll run his parents ragged before fledging and leaving them in peace. The eagles aren't so lucky. Their chick won't leave until it's close to 3 months old, and it requires a lot more food than the woodpecker. Dad's nowhere to be seen, so back to the hunt goes its mother. The timing couldn't be worse for the marmots. They've finally re-emerged from their burrow and are just getting comfortable outdoors again. More urgent warning calls. More mad dashes. But this time, one youngster isn't quick enough to the burrow. The eagle has her meal, and the tight-knit marmot colony is down one member. Like a natural cycle, construction at King Ludwig's ever-expanding castle continued season after season. As summer turned to fall, months and years blended into decades. The turrets and towers rose slowly above the trees, and costs continued to skyrocket. By 1880, 11 years after construction began, the main palace was enclosed, though the exterior was still far from complete. Inside, work had begun on the lavish furnishings. Central to Ludwig's desires was the all-important throne room, which was carefully designed for one purpose: to embody the medieval doctrine of divine right of kings. The paintings of Jesus, the 12 apostles, and 6 canonized kings were a representation of the unrestricted God-given power of the monarch. It was ironic symbolism for a king whose power had been whittled down by the unification of Bavaria with Germany, and who exhibited almost no desire to rule. In actuality, Ludwig was becoming more and more of a recluse, spending most of his time in his private chambers at the top of the castle. He often slept during the day and wandered the halls at night, living in his fairy tale world. When he did venture out, it wasn't to see his subjects or his court. It was to get back to nature and make sure his animals were doing okay. With his servants in tow, Ludwig braved the cold to bring fresh hay to his beloved red deer. In the winter, the deer struggled to survive, digging in the snow for the frozen grasses buried beneath. Because hunting had been banned, the deer weren't afraid and came in close. Ludwig stayed with them for hours, enjoying the solitude and the fresh winter air. He must have felt a connection to these animals that was missing from his interactions with people. Just as the animals warmed his heart, so did the spring warm his body when it came. Among the first out are the grouse. This huge male capercaillie lives in the forest and has a grand display to attract potential mates. But so far, no one is watching. The smaller black grouse is a related species that prefers more open terrain. The males, called blackcocks, are glamorous and flashy. In King Ludwig's day, their plumage was popular in noble ladies' hats. The females are a more subdued grayish-brown, earning them the accurate but flavorless nickname, gray hen. During mating season, the males prance and strut, offering up a distinctive bubbling call to attract potential mates. A female takes notice. In the forest, the capercaillie is still singing to an empty theater. The black grouse is having more luck, but he's attracting more than just the female. A rival male closes in for a fight. It's a behavior called lekking. Puffed up and aggressive, they wrestle and bite to impress the female, who doesn't seem enthralled. Eventually, the loser beats a hasty retreat. And the winner heads off to track down his prize. The capercaillie cock finally has an audience as well. A hen has joined him for a romantic stroll in the woods. High on the mountainside, male and female alpine ibex are also socializing. These large wild goats mated earlier in the season, but haven't yet disbanded into their single-sex groups. While the dominant male preens, the younger males are still trying to horn in on the females, who by this point in the season are no longer interested. But it's good practice for the youngsters. who are trying to move up in the dominance hierarchy. Dominance is determined primarily by horn size. Unlike the red deer, who lose their antlers each year, the ibex spend their entire lives growing one set of horns. When the big boss strolls in, there's no doubt who's in control. The females are less concerned with him than with keeping their young out of harm's way. That's easier said than done with the rambunctious calves. The big male? He just seems giddy with it all. In the lakes below, a more chaotic interaction is brewing. It's mating season for the common toad, and the males are gathering. They're all in search of one thing. And when they see it, they quickly jump on board. The big toad is a female, though she's not treated like much of a lady. Dozens of males fight for position. There are no rules in this brawl, and the males are so rough, and there are so many of them, the females sometimes drown beneath their weight. The fighting can go on for days, and only the male who's in the right spot when she lays her thousands of eggs gets to fertilize them. It's quite a different scene for the birds on the lakes. By summer, their eggs have hatched, and they're enjoying family time with the chicks. The mother swan's eggs have become a brood of adorable puffballs. They're growing fast and spend much of their time cruising for food with mom. The mallard duck chicks are also out and about, enjoying the summer sun as their mother looks on. Mallard females lay more than half their body weight in eggs and need time to recover. She spends time lounging with her babies. The chicks are happy to oblige. They imprinted on her at birth and watch her diligently, picking up behaviors and learning how to be ducks. Some will stay with her all the way through to the next breeding season. The more independent ones will take off once they can fly. Until then, the mother guards them, always on the lookout for danger. By 1886, King Ludwig must have been sensing the danger as well. Construction costs continued to escalate out of control, and he spent less and less time governing. His ministers decided they had to take action. They concluded that a diagnosis of insanity would prove he was unfit to rule. They built a case that was endorsed by a panel of psychiatrists who never even examined him. One of the most damning bits of evidence? His unconscionably expensive swan castle. Neuschwanstein, his only haven, had now become a noose around his neck. And it was only a matter of time before his subordinates would pull it tight. In the shadow of the castle walls, other dangers lie quietly in wait. The European adder is a venomous snake that is prevalent in these parts. This species is well suited for the cool climate, able to widen its body to absorb more sun. It feeds on small mammals, birds, lizards, and amphibians, and likes complex habitats with a variety of different terrains. This female has just given birth, as few other snakes do. She carried her eggs internally, another adaptation for the cool temperatures, then laid them just before they were ready to hatch. The babies start fighting their way out of the rubbery eggs almost immediately. They hatch fully formed and venomous, and will shed their skin for the first time within a day or so. Once the babies are born, their mother pays them little attention. Within days, they'll be off on their own, competing for food with all the other snakes. This smooth snake has just caught a lizard, but the snake may have bitten off more than it can chew. It looks like a draw, a writhing pretzel of muscle and teeth. But eventually, the snake prevails and secures itself a hard-earned lunch. Another European adder is also having success. It's caught itself a mouse. The adder has an advantage over the smooth snake. After an initial bite, it simply waits until its venom takes hold. Then maneuvers into position for a slow but steady meal. It takes a few hours and leaves the snake looking quite bloated, but it's a capture and kill that was never in doubt. Ludwig was in better shape than the mouse, but barely. He was under attack and isolated in his secluded fairy tale home. To his court and his kingdom, Neuschwanstein had become an immovable weight, the symbol of a king who had lost touch with reality. On June 10, 1886, an armed delegation arrived at the castle, which was still far from complete. They took King Ludwig into custody and stripped him of his rule. Only 3 days later, while on a lakeside walk with one of the doctors who had diagnosed him, both he and the doctor died under mysterious circumstances. Conspiracy theories linger to this day. Some say he was shot and killed by his political enemies, who kept his body hidden so no bullet wound could be found. Others say he killed the doctor, then died of a heart attack brought on by the cold water as he tried to escape across the lake. Either way, the king was dead, and Neuschwanstein, his dream castle, was largely responsible for his downfall. As a final twist of the knife, the castle was opened to the public within weeks of his death, even as construction continued. Visitors were allowed to walk the halls and ogle at the spectacle of the reclusive king's most private retreat. Ironically, the castle that drove Ludwig to financial ruin became a windfall for the Bavarian government. Minting money as one of Germany's most lucrative tourist attractions. The cross that marks his death, on the other hand, remains a quiet refuge, watched over only by the swans he so adored during his life. If there is any redemption for the poor king, it's that Neuschwanstein, the new swan castle, is seen today as a spectacular example of castle romanticism. And its surroundings continue to provide sanctuary for the animals he loved. The fantasy land he so longed for is still a reality more than 130 years after his death. Despite its melancholy human story, it is as beautiful as ever. A fantastical castle set among a lasting haven for fantastic beasts.